What's up, everybody? We are back with another episode of The Jungle. Before we get started today, guys, I want to thank everybody that has continued to give us support, check us out. I want to encourage everybody, if you hop on and come check us out on YouTube, Spotify, Apple, or Amazon, leave us a review, rate us. All that does is help push us up in the rankings, get our message out there to people. Again, the show is not monetized. That's never been my goal, and it's not my goal. All it does is get us out there to more people who need to hear that you can make a great life for yourself after felonies, drug addictions, or just struggles. So again, check us out YouTube. Give us a like, give us a subscribe. And I want to thank all my former guests who have come on and shared their stories, shared their troubles, and shared their victories. Guys, today with me, I have Nikole Thompson, Nikki Thompson. Do you prefer to go by Nikki or Nikole?
I go by both. I go by both.
I'm going to call you Nikki because I like Nikki more.
Okay.
Guys, Nikki is the author of 50 Shades of Truth. She is the mother of a small army, a wife, motivational speaker, minister for Celebrate Recovery. She has 17 years sober as of May. And most importantly, and the main reason I wanted to have her on is she loves God. She has put God at the center of her recovery, and she is using she's using God to help other people become clean, find God, so on and so forth. So, Nikole, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
No, I signed up for that podcastguest.com and I saw there's not a whole lot of people that have recovery or prison that go on there and put their stories out there. So it's kind of been like a dud, but they give me like a Google spreadsheet. So I'll pop on like once a month and see who might fit the bill. And I saw your name and I was like, and I'll be completely honest with you. You and I had a conversation. It was a couple weeks ago when we decided to set this whole thing up. And the main reason that I wanted to have you on and the main thing that caught my attention is I grew up in church. I grew up in youth groups and I fell very far away from God in the last probably 15 to 20 years. Just recently, I've started praying again, and I've reestablished a relationship with God, and it's been a very big milestone for me in my life because I finally had to come to terms with the fact that it was people that hurt me. It wasn't God that hurt me. Yeah. So when I saw you were part of Celebrate Recovery, my brother is a pastor. He started a Celebrate Recovery program when I was in the midst of all my troubles. And I never went because when you're in the middle of all that, nobody wants to talk about God. Nobody wants to hear about all the things that they're doing wrong. So I kind of like floundered, never really went. But when I saw Celebrate Recovery, I was like, she would be an awesome guest to have on. So thank you so much for coming on. I appreciate you coming on more than you probably realize. So let's get into it. Why don't you just kind of tell everybody who you are, where you're from, and a little bit of your backstory.
Okay. So right now I'm in Iowa. My husband has taken a job here in Iowa, but I'm from everywhere. So born and raised in a small town in Minnesota, raised by my dad. My parents divorced when I was young. And my dad was amazing, very present there. He was self-employed, never missed a game, just there. And every Sunday we went to church. We went to a little Lutheran church, and it didn't matter what you did on Saturday night, you got up and you went to church on Sunday. And when I was 14, kind of, nobody wants to live in a town of 2,000 people where everybody's all up in your business. And so I saw moving to my mom's in Evansville, Indiana as freedom. So Evansville, Indiana is about 250,000 people. So it was super, huge. My high school had 2,000 people. Like that was the whole population of my town. 14-year-old Nikki just didn't know what to do with that. And my mom, clinical psychologist, she ended up finally getting her doctorate. She worked at a group home. And so she would leave on Friday night and not come home till Monday morning. Well, that was just way too much freedom for a 14-year-old to have. And so I found myself smoking pot, sleeping with the neighbor boy, drinking, smoking cigarettes, just all the normal stuff that, kids get into and kind of experiment with. And by 16, I found myself pregnant with my oldest son. So I shifted gears. I went to one of those like alternative high schools where you can graduate early. Got into college, had my own place, new boyfriend, found myself pregnant again. And so by age 20, that boyfriend and I broke up. And I realized I'd never really seen a healthy relationship. My mom and dad divorced when I was 2, never really seen what a normal relationship should look like. And I definitely didn't have any self-worth because here I am. I got these two different kids, two different daddies. And I just felt like everyone, maybe I felt like I walked around with like a used label on my forehead or something, you know? And so at 20, when I met my husband, I was in college. I had a fake ID and I was drinking in the bars. And he had asked me out, and I was like, yeah, I'm not going out with you. And he was like, no, come on, I'm serious. And I was like, well, I don't have anything to wear, so we're not going on a date. And he said, well, hop in, I'll go buy you a new outfit. So, like, looking back, I realized I probably didn't have a lot of relationships that poured into me. And so I took him up on it. We got a new outfit. We went out singing karaoke. He didn't drink. He didn't smoke. He had been sober and clean for like 3 or 4 years, but he loves karaoke and he loves to play pool. And so like that was just something from his past that he never quit. And as we dated for a couple of weeks, I found out he had custody of 5 of his 6 kids, a legit kind of stand-up kind of guy. Like my yes means yes, my no means no. One time, you know, those old box caller IDs. One time someone called and he was like, oh, I don't want to talk to them. And I said, oh, let me answer it. I'll tell him you're not here. And he was like, I don't need you to lie for me. If I don't want to talk to somebody, I'm going to tell him I don't want to talk to him. And so, you know, that was big for me, that little white lies, like, you know, what you're saying matters. And so probably the clincher for me, about maybe 2 or 3 weeks in, I had slept on his couch and it was a Sunday morning and he had his 4 little boys lined up in a row, a squirt bottle in one hand and a brush in the other. And he was doing their hair, getting them ready for church. And I had 2 little boys that needed a dad. They needed someone to look up to that was going to show them what it means to be a man, what it means to work, what it means to love, like all those things that he represented with his kids. And then when I found out that his oldest son wasn't even his, he had adopted him. And after him and his wife split up and she left him with all these kids, like he kept him and was raising him as his own. And I was like, all right, I could do this. So at 20, I married a 36-year-old man who had 5 kids, which literally made us 6 boys and a girl. And then when we had Freddie, our baby, together in 2000, 7 boys, 1 girl, all under one roof. And so when you say small army, it's legit. That's what I had. And people, he had to pick a 20-year-old. Nobody else can handle that. Like,
nobody had the energy for it. Nobody had the energy for it.
It was a lot. So God blessed us with a construction company. He was out playing pool one night and this lady was like, hey, I need a roof put on. I heard you're the guy. And he was like, yeah, I can put together a crew. So like at first we thought, oh, we are going to bless these guys with our family friendly lifestyle. Like we're going to show them what it looks like to blend a home, to do things right, not drink, not do drugs. We didn't even allow smoking on our property. Like we did have standards. And I'm sad to say that within 1 year, it just was a crap show. Like bad company really does corrupt good morals. Like that scripture.
Yeah, that industry. I've got tons of friends that are in that industry. I've got tons of sober friends. I've got tons of friends who are still out there, and that industry is rampant with drug use.
Yeah, and we had guys that we hired from the safe house. Like, sorry for my dogs wrestling.
They're fine.
We had guys that were from the safe house, and so they would get day passes to come work with us. And like, we really thought that it was going to make the difference. Again, like I said, I think it was maybe within 30 or 60 days that the lies had begun and stuff just started to turn sour. Eventually, you know, he was staying gone more nights than coming home. Lies, infidelity, drug dealing, which of course, the way the enemy got in with that was, you know, your workers are going to go looking for it somewhere. It's safer if you provide it for them, was basically the gist of what my husband realizes how he got, you know, taken down. And so I remember at my son Freddie's first birthday, just like looking around and realizing like, this is not what I signed up for. I knew that he was cheating. We had both already been arrested. We were on our way to a Godsmack concert and we had 1.5 pounds of marijuana on us. We were going to do a drop and obviously got set up. We were pulled over by a canine unit. And so he has a huge record. I had none. So I took the charge. And then, cause I was just going to get probation, a misdemeanor, you know, and it was a Class D felony, but got bumped down to a misdemeanor once I completed it. And cause we weren't using. And even though I really wasn't in the game with him, I knew what he was doing. Like, you know, I was absolutely helping and we didn't need the money, which is what's even worse about how crafty the enemy is because we were making a boatload of money with the construction company. Like we didn't need extra money, but there's just this greedy element. You always want more. And so whatever it was that took us down. So eventually, we would hide 20 pounds of pot in our vacuum cleaner box in our bedroom. That's where we'd stash it. And we were going through that every week or two. And then a friend came to him and said, "Hey, if you think there's a lot of money in pot, you should see what's out there in the meth world." And so Tony started dealing, and then eventually he started cooking. Like they taught him how to cook. Again, like I said, he was cheating on me. And so I left him, packed all my stuff up in the middle of the night, got a U-Haul at like 8 a.m. I had called my dad, borrowed money to get out, and I was out. And, so 24, really drinking in the bars for the first time, because that's my learned coping mechanism from my mom. She was a drinker. Through Celebrate Recovery, you kind of learn all of those. Oh, where did I learn this from? Where did I learn that from? Like, what do I use to cope? And so I realized that alcohol was something I always bounced back to. And so I was in the bars, and it was 2002, and Dr. Dre came out with a song called "You Can't Turn a Hoe into a Housewife." And so, like,
Yeah, we did.
now,
I remember that one.
now I can recognize a little more clearly when thoughts are bouncing around in my head who's sending them my way. But I remember being drunk thinking he didn't want, because he left me for multiple strippers, and the girl that he moved in was a dancer. And I just remember, okay, he didn't want a housewife. He didn't want someone that took the kids to the YMCA swim lessons, that prayed, because we prayed before meals. We ate supper every night. Like we were a family. We took the kids camping. Like we did normal family things. And, that's the only thing I could see that he didn't want. I was too controlling, too rigid, too not fun. And so I called him up and I said, "Hey, I know you're doing meth. I want to do it too." And he came over that very same night, and I was instantly addicted. I loved the way meth made me feel, the things I could get accomplished, how it was helping me shed those unwanted pounds. Because, of course, as girls, women, we always think that, oh, I'm cheated on because I'm not pretty enough. I'm not skinny enough. I'm not this. I'm not that. And it also let me party all weekend. And then I could go to work on Monday morning because I had a job in corporate America. And so I literally at that corporate America job for about a year and a half doing meth on the daily. And so we spiraled out of control together, became super toxic, because he would come, go. He's still seeing whoever. And so for 4 months we used together. It was 4 months of his relapse before he went back to prison. And he was arrested, facing 96 years in the state of Illinois, which is pretty strict. Yeah. And that's where most of his issues were from Chicago when he was a young man. And so, I was kind of like, haha, you got what you deserve. Because I don't know, it's so toxic when you're in a drug relationship with someone. And so I had grown to kind of hate him, despise him. And, it just justified my drug use. It just justified me doing everything I wanted to because I had absolutely no ownership, complete denial. And so he's in jail. He takes a plea for 8 years. His class X was 6 to 30. And they were like, all right, they're willing to drop these other 2 X charges. He had 3 class X charges. And so he was facing 90 years. They were willing to drop 2 of them, but the one that he couldn't get away with, like the drugs, whatever, he was going to have to do something on that. And he was like, well, I will absolutely take 6 years. And they're like, yeah, they're not going to give you 6 years. And he was like, we can try for 8, but who knows? And he said that feds were coming around, grabbing up cases, and you were going to have to do a lot more of your time, So he went ahead. They submitted the 8 years. They took it. So praise God, he ended up getting 3.5 years in prison. Started out higher security. Up, I think the first time I went to see him, he was up there by the 4 quads in one of the prisons. But he moved 3 or 4 times. I went to visit him in 3.5 years, I think 6 times only, just because, again, I was strung out on meth. You have those moments of clarity where you're like, oh, I really do love him. But then, the enemy comes in with all these thoughts. Look what he did. Look how he treated you, know. And then couple that with these letters he would send me all about Jesus. He instantly found Jesus as soon as he went to jail. And so I was like, okay, this is jailhouse religion. Good for you. I'm glad that you found your thing. I don't want anything to do with it. And he would write me these letters, and everyone was signed, "Love always and forever your husband." And so he later told me that he was standing on Romans 4:17, calling those things which be not as though they already are. And bringing God into remembrance of his word, that he is a God who restores, that he is a God who redeems, that he is a God who, makes up for the years that the locusts ate, and that he did want to put our family back together, even if that's not what he was seeing in my behavior. And so for 3.5 years, he would write me. And for 3.5 years, I would just, go further and further and further into addiction. And so, what may have started out as snorting or smoking, you say all these things. I will never. I will never.
Okay, so you were still using while he was in prison.
Whole time he was in prison, 3.5 years. Active addiction, like my last year of using was probably the worst, obviously, because it just spirals. So it had gotten to the place where I was so depressed and hated my life so bad, but you wouldn't know it. You would think that I loved it because I acted like I loved it. That if I didn't have a way to get high, then I was looking for a way to get drunk. In my book, I actually even talk about he had been spraying embalming fluid on marijuana to make it stronger for a more potent hit. And one time I didn't have any weed, I didn't have any money, I didn't have any meth, I didn't have nothing. And so I thought, oh, I'll quick spray it on some cigarettes. And I lit my whole face up, lost my eyebrows, a little bit of my back. Yeah. Because it takes a day or two for that stuff to dry. It's drying out your dead body. That's what it's meant for, not for you to ingest. And so everybody knows that when you're numbing those painful memories, you don't want them to come back to the surface, and therefore you get high again. So it's that vicious cycle. And, the morning after, whether it was the drugs, whether it was after, miscellaneous partners or whatever it was that I was trying to stop it, whatever it was, the morning after, you just hate yourself. And so you start that cycle all over again. And so, so that's where I found myself, just in darkness. And I didn't the kids were wards of the state, but praise God, we never lost them. I'm very blessed. In this whole time, I did catch a couple of different cases for buying the pills because, that's what's needed to make meth. And so I was a little pill hustler for the different dope cooks. And so I ended up having to do a long stint of probation, and in order to get intent to manufacture off my record. But it just was a death trap, an absolute death trap. And so when he got out 3.5 years later in April of 2006, and he showed up at my doorstep, I wanted nothing to do with him. I opened the door, he was looking at me, which I was wearing a pro-gay shirt. I was living with a woman by this time. And I'd just been super promiscuous, just sexually immoral to all get out, which that's what those drugs bring. I had avid on porn. And again, that's what those drugs bring. And so when he showed up at my doorstep, I'm thinking, oh my God, he can see the track marks in my arm. He's looking at this. He's not going to put up with me raising his kid like this. He will take Freddie from me. You better just slam that door before he has anything to say. And before I could shut the door in his face, Freddie comes running in, who's just 5. And so I'm like, all right, let's go in the kitchen. Let's get this lecture over with. And Freddie would not leave the room. He was so excited to see his dad, hadn't seen him for probably 6 months to a year. And so before I knew it, because I'd asked him multiple times, Freddie, leave the room, Freddie, go in the other room, Freddie, get out. I'm elevating. And then finally, in the midst of it, I throw a whole bunch of curse words out there at my 5-year-old, telling him to get the bleep into the other room. And he begins to cry. And so Tony picks him up, puts him on his lap, and just begins to embrace him and hug him and rub his little back and run his fingers through his hair. And he's like, Freddie, mommy and daddy love you. And mommy and daddy want to hear what you have to say. But mommy and daddy have to talk first. So be the obedient little boy that you are and go in the other room. And when we're done talking, we'll hear what you have to say. And so for me, that was the most positive thing ever. I'm going to let this dog out. I was just amazed at his behavior and how he could contain himself, how he could be so kind to me, how he could include me in those affirmations. It would be one thing for a guy to be like, daddy's here, daddy's going to fix it now. But he was like, mommy and daddy love you. And so when Freddie went in the other room, he said, look, this world is going to kick the crap out of our kids. This world is going to tell them everything they can't do. And it's our job as the parents to call out the good. Like, we have to speak life over them. Freddie is an obedient little boy, and that's our job. And so for me, you know, there's two scriptures I always refer back to, Romans 2:4, which says it's the kindness and goodness of God that draws us in, that woos us in, that causes us to want to repent. And so that day I saw kindness and goodness in my husband. And then also, you can't fake fruit. Well, people will talk and say whatever they want, but when their words line up with their actions, and when someone gets pushed, someone bullies one of your kids, what do? You typically react, unless you have self-control. And self-control is a fruit of the spirit: love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, gentleness, self-control. And so for me, I knew it was real. It wasn't jailhouse religion. Because you can't, like, when someone's on meth, they can pull you into their crazy fast.
Oh,
And
yeah.
he pulled me into his peace, which was the peace of God, which you can't fake, like, when you have that. And so, I it'd be great if I could say it's been roses ever since, but that was 18 years ago this May. I need to update that. So 18 years free from
Oh,
meth.
I'm sorry.
No, you're totally
I thought I
cool.
did good here.
No, you did
I'm like,
great.
oh, I did some
Hey,
math here.
17, 18. You know what? Once you hit those double digits, praise God. I just give God the glory
Yeah.
for each year. So, yeah. So, he was like, I want you to relocate to where I'm at. We got to get out of Evansville. It's vultures. They're going to tear us down. And we go back and minister every now and then. We got grown kids that live there, family members that live there. But like, we left that place joyfully, joyfully. And so, our first 7, 8 years was raising kids, 10 years raising kids. Freddie launched at 17. And now for the past, 7, 8, 9 years, we've just been sharing what Jesus did for us. Before we started the Celebrate Recovery, we went to New Orleans to plant a church. Louisiana has the highest recidivism rate. And so when a friend of ours called Tony to co-pastor, he said, look, you've got everything that could inspire hope. God restored your marriage. You're a multiple time felon. You've got a successful lawn care, business. That's what he started doing when he got out of prison, a lawn care business. You're sober, you're clean, and you're not a bitter. You're not like a dry drunk. Like, you
Yeah.
can see that you have joy. And so we moved to New Orleans to plant a church right dead smack in the heart of the city. Probably hardest couple of years of my life. But truthfully, they bore the most fruit. 2 of my daughter-in-laws are from Louisiana. 5 of my grandchildren are from Louisiana. And so it's definitely been worth it. It's definitely been worth it. And now for the past 7, 8 years in Madisonville, Kentucky, we went there. It's an hour south of Evansville. So it's close enough to see the kids, but not to be part of the drama. Went to a church. They were like, hey, will you start a Celebrate Recovery? We've tried before. It hasn't worked. And I think that Tony and I's biggest mission is, a lot of times when people get saved, or people want to get clean, or people want to change their life, it's like, okay, great, good luck. You're saved, go and sin no more. Well, what does that look like? Because when I get up and I walk out those doors, I still have all the same thoughts I used to have. I'm still thinking about that fix or using. I'm still thinking about, twisted thoughts. I'm still seeing people that I'm lustfully drawn towards. I'm still struggling. All these same things that I went to the altar with haven't changed. And if we don't disciple people from that moment on, then what are we doing? And so Celebrate Recovery successfully does that. It's going on 30 years. It's proven to work, and it's a duplication process. Like, you work your steps, and then you help someone else work their steps, and you keep doing it, and you keep reaching out to people that are further along and drawing insight and wisdom from them, and you keep on pouring into the next. And so that's something that is crucial if people are going to find true freedom. Like, we hear enough stories of garbage crap, you'll never make it. Those stories of hope have to be planted on the inside so they can bear some fruit.
So you brought up a few buzzwords that I want to talk about real quick. Little white lies. The reason I want to talk about it is because after stopping heroin and pills and all that stuff, I never stopped lying. And it wasn't They were the little white lies. And it was, so I met my wife when I came home from prison. It was about 2 years after. And so it would have been throughout about 6, 7 years, I never wanted to have conversations, hard conversations. And I didn't understand that hard conversations, what would help build your relationship and heal you. And so over those like 6 years, and it would be little stuff. I wasn't doing anything that she was going to get mad about, but it would be, did you feed the dog? Well, me in my old addictive mind state still, I'm like, well, yeah, I fed the dog, but I really hadn't, but I'll go do it
Yeah.
real quick so she doesn't know. Like I took care of what
Yeah.
you needed me to take care of. So then those progressed over the years, not in anything like detrimental, but she started
Yeah.
picking up on it. And I would always say, for whatever reason, even in those 6 years, I would say, well, I'm only lying about little stuff. I would never lie to you about the big stuff. And now for like the last couple of years, I'm like, that made absolutely no sense whatsoever, because if I can't have conversations about, like, I was like justifying it in my mind. I'm like, well, I'm
Yeah.
not lying to you about anything like serious. If something serious happened, I would tell you the truth.
Yeah.
No, I wouldn't. No, I wouldn't, because I don't want to have those hard conversations. So over the last couple of years, we took a break. It was about 2 years ago. For about a month, I had started to blow our life up again. I relapsed, but that was the turning point in kind of me making a full circle.
Yeah.
Was I realized, and dude, I love my wife to death, because she kept pushing it on me. She was like, I know you're not doing anything like extremely like extreme, but I'm not dealing with the white lies or the little lies. So over the last couple of years, it's been a lot of communication, a lot of growth in our relationship. I like when you brought it up, because your husband, and this is another reason, and I really want to have your husband on if he's ever willing to do an episode, because when you said he was looking at the caller ID and he's like, I don't need you to lie for me. Like, if I don't want to talk to him, I'm not going to talk to him. And what's wild, and what's wild is, in my day-to-day life, every person I encounter, I'm the same way. Yeah. Like, even when I was in addiction, I'm not going to lie to you. If I don't like you, I'm going to tell you I don't like you. If I don't want to do something, I'm going to tell you I don't want to do it. But with her, it was like that was the one area I could not stop, because I didn't want to cause chaos.
Rejection, fear of disappointment, rejection, the unknown, how's she going to respond? Yeah, absolutely.
So it's been awesome over the last couple of years, because we've been able to hash out a lot of things and been able to work on a lot of things. But that little white lies caught my attention. So let's talk real quick about your book.
Okay.
So you came out with 50 Shades of Truth. I think it was January of 2021.
Yes. Well,
okay.
It had been in the process since 2016 is when God told me to write it. I remember one of the first times my husband and we went on this like 2-hour motorcycle ride, and our friends all had the great motorcycles where the woman's in the back, like in a chair, and I'm there with nothing. So I can't be on my phone. I can't do anything. I'm just riding, looking at God's creation, and he's downloading what he's wanting me to write about in chapters. And so 50 Shades of Truth, the truth is made up of the word lies.
Oh, okay.
And so just basically, we live in an instant gratification world. We live in a fallen world, not how God created it or desired it to be. And so therefore, what God creates, Satan counterfeits. And so what we're seeing in the media, what we're seeing in music, in TV, since the iPhone came out with, Instagram, Facebook, all these different apps and these things, is this instant gratification, swipe right. It's mostly my true real life story, my marriage, divorce, drug addiction, and then even now parenting, and just basically how I believe that right now it's a social contagion, what we're seeing with our teenagers.
Absolutely.
Meaning that like, oh, my other friends are doing it, so that must mean I need to do it too. And it's almost like a bullying. They don't even realize they're being manipulated. For me, I created a word, cultivate, what our current culture is cultivating inside of us. So again, back in 2002, Tattoo was a music group that came out, two little, straight teenage girls, and they had a Russian music producer, and he literally was quoted saying that he knew that men wanted more underage porn. And so he has these two little schoolgirls kissing in the rain. And they're in their little Britney Spears, like, little school. And again, this is when I'm in the clubs for the first time ever, drinking. I'm doing meth. And then I'm starting to sleep around. And so all that sexual immorality. And then I see this and I think, okay, what I would call soft porn or not real porn to girls, it's okay. I'm not looking at anything bad. But eventually it started taking over my mind. So whereas I never thought about girls as a little girl growing up, I wasn't born this way. I was cultivated this way. Like I was made this way because of the people that I was around, the shape of the environment that I was in, and what I was allowing to feed my mind. And so, like I said, I was living with a woman by the time Tony got out of prison. And so about 2.5 years into my drug addiction, I had a boyfriend who definitely manipulated me. I didn't realize it. His wife was in prison. She was a stripper and they had multiple threesomes. And I talk about this in the book. My book's very raw. It's very real. And I've rated it adult for a reason. I do think teenagers can read it because I think they see much worse. But I think that parents and adults need to be aware of how these lies are influencing our children. So, I had a pretty crazy life there for a little while. I thought I was going to be the female Hugh Hefner. Like I was going to have all these girlfriends. I was going to sell adult toys. I was traveling to underground swinger clubs. I was buying pills.
So much like my ex-wife.
I was buying pills as I was traveling. I had a plan. And here, Joyce Meyer says this: the best personalities will make the best criminals, but they'll make the best presidents as well.
Oh, yeah.
And so what God intended for good, Satan was distorting. And I had a business plan and I had all these things. And I mean, we would be sitting around at parties smoking dope. And I mean, the dope dealers would give me more and more and be like, tell me more. Where are we going to do this at? Like, I'm ready.
Yeah. It's real funny you say that because our youngest, our 11-year-old, we literally say all the time, we're like, he's either going to be the leader of a prison gang or he's going to be the president of the United States.
Yep. Yep. And continue to say that president of the United States over and over and over again. Making a difference.
No, we don't tell him that.
Yeah. But, so, and this is again, 2005, 2006. So this is the year before the iPhone came out. This is MySpace is all that's available. My videos aren't out there. Thank you, Jesus. Like every time I sponsor a young girl, I'm like, honey, I'm so sorry. Like, I just feel so bad for this generation because they just don't realize, once you put it out there, it's there. And the lie was, and I talk about it in my book because I've listened to dozens of women that have gotten out of the porn industry or gotten out of what, and, all these different, sex trafficking and whatever. But the lie for me back then was they're having a great time. Like, yeah. Pay to have them. Want to do. And at that time.
I'll tell you real quick, anybody watching this, there are several Netflix documentaries, or you can check out the Soft White Underbelly.
Lies.
And they have women on there that discuss how awful, degrading, and terrible it is.
Absolutely. All total lies. If you don't fake it, if you don't make it look good, I will ruin you. You'll never have a job in this industry again. You will do. And that was, pornography 20 years ago. And now it's become painful and violent. And it's horrific because they have to keep adding to the content to keep the consumers continuing to look and to continue to want, because there's that dopamine hit that you're getting and you continue to need more, want more. And so, like I tell everyone, I would not have 18 years free from meth if this was a pipe filled with dope. And so if you're struggling with porn, I've talked to specialists who have said you have to go to a dumb phone. You cannot have video. I mean, you really, even the pictures, but if you have to have a phone for your work, you cannot have one that allows you access to the internet. Yeah. Not at first, because you've got to get some longevity in there, some sobriety. But anyway, and then for parents to think that their kids aren't seeing it. We used to keep Playboys locked up in the closet, but now we hand our kids phones and we don't check them.
Well, and I'm going to tell you this whole TikTok thing. Now, I'm a truck driver. I got on TikTok because I used to troll the crap out of my daughter. I would stitch her videos and make fun of her. Yeah. It was fun.
Yeah.
And this was when she was in middle school. And then I became a truck driver and I got on Trucker Talk. So I was like, oh, I'm going to start making videos. And it's no wonder why it's in kids' faces all the time. And what's wild is you look at these little dances that they do and like these little trends,
Yeah.
and it's all sexualized. And you've got 13-year-old girls doing these like, I, I'm not going to mention any names. There's somebody in my life who has a very little girl. She's about 3 years old. And she will do videos to this little girl dancing to songs about sex. She'll have
Yep.
a face full of makeup, and it drives me insane. I've sent her messages like, stop doing this. This isn't okay. She says no. And I'm like, it's almost, it's shocking. But you have all these girls that are on here not realizing the content that they're putting out. And and all they see is the little ticker in the corner that says 87.5 million people have seen this video. How many of those people are predators? How many of those
Yeah.
people are disgusting human beings or have problems? You know what I mean? It's scary. And I've tried to have that conversation with my daughter. Like, you have to be very vigilant and cautious, like, as to what you are putting out on the internet, because A, it's there forever.
Yeah.
And B, you don't know who's looking at that.
Exactly. Well, and so I'm going to tell you, mostly because you're dealing with prison or ministry, podcast and everything. A legit reason behind my book in 2016, when we moved our second year in Madisonville, Kentucky, a family reached out to us, old family friends, and we had already started our 501c3, which was Prisoner to Preacher. It's the nonprofit my husband started, just, wanting to get going, sharing our testimony, letting people know there is hope after addiction, after prison, after all these things. Like, I've listened to several of your podcasts. You got to just keep going, just keep pressing through until you finally get that yes, and you will get it. But you got to get through the no's to get to the yeses. We want to do prison ministry. I'm excited about recovery, helping people, parenting, yada, yada, yada. And this family reaches out to us. Their daughter was arrested because her daughter was molested by her dad. Okay. And so we're helping this family. Both parents are in jail, the mom and the dad. Daughter's in foster care. And we're going into the house to pack up the mom's things and put them up. The woman who was arrested, her father had reached out to us and asked us if we would help. And I was like, God, this is just like, why would you give us this? I mean, he was like, you asked for prison ministry. You don't get to pick and choose who you're going to help and what you're going to deal with. And so, the grandfather had given us the discovery. I read the discovery, and there are things that once you read them, you can't get rid of them. And you just have no business read. There are things you see that you watch.
Yep.
That's the big point of the book. When you water those seeds of darkness, it does something to you. So, anyway, little girl's doing great now. I think she might, 2016. So she's got to be, 20, 21, almost graduated high school, got adopted by a great family, doing amazing. But as we're going into this home, we're packing up things, looking through things, and I see this box of what looks like stripper shoes that the police officers didn't take into, whatever, and they think that it was the mom's. Well, I know this mom. She wears the same size shoe as me, 9.5. These shoes were 7s. These shoes were 6.5. These shoes were intended for a 12-year-old little girl. And it made me these like rough shoes that this dad had her wear. And so I go in the bathroom, I'm bawling, I'm throwing up, I'm sick, I'm crying, I'm mad, I'm angry. God, you suck. Why would you let this happen? All these thoughts. And he literally asked, like audibly, I heard the voice of God, where were you 10 years ago this month? And so this was in February of 2016. And in February of 2006, right before my husband got out of prison, he got out in April. In February, I took my taxes. I bought into passion parties, which is adult toys. I was already going to underground swinger clubs. I hadn't started traveling and networking like I wanted to, but I was on the cusp of it when my husband got out of prison. And so darkness only gets darker, darker, grosser, more horrific, more, and so where would I have been had I not got clean 10 years earlier is what God asked me. And I remember, there was one time a joke was made at a party. If we got to get it, if we're getting our next person encounter with an ice cream truck, there's something wrong. They've got to be old enough to go into the bars. That was always the old Nikki standard. Okay, you've got to be able to get into a bar. You've got to have an ID. You know, but eventually that fades. And I've watched it. I've watched people like, oh, I've got this teenage boyfriend. You wouldn't believe what I've taught him to do, or just dumb, sick, gross, foul stuff because that's someone's kid. You know what I mean? And so when you're talking about who out of all those TikTok people is watching, you have people that groom people. I was
Yeah.
groomed. I was in a relationship that I thought was a good relationship. I thought I was a liberated woman making all of these choices for myself. And I was just deceived and I was in darkness and I was going to take as many people down with me as I could. And then God saved me. He broke through, thanks to my husband getting out of prison just in time. And there, but for the grace of God, go I. I don't own an island, but I was that close.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
No,
And
and
so,
it's disgusting and it's wild at this point how accepting a lot of that is in society. I like sometimes I sit back and I think and I'm how did we get here? Where was the break in like morality that we're now at the point where all these people, like, nobody protects kids. It's
absolutely.
becoming more and more common for somebody to sleep with an underage kid or fantasize about an underage kid. The people that get
Yeah.
caught doing it, they get a slap on the wrist and they're pushed right out the back door. They're segregated. I mean, it's become wild. I was just so again, I'm a trucker. I go to Planet Fitnesses. That's where I park. So every night I'm in the gym to get a workout in. I was in Greenville, Indiana just this past week. So I'm working out. Very cute middle-aged woman is in there working out. And there's this guy, the kid. Now, I'm guessing the kid was probably 17, 18. I'm hoping he was at least 18, but he looked very young. So at first I'm thinking, mom and her son, that's cool. They're working out. So I'm kind of like doing my thing, but I'm like keeping eyes because I'm like, something's not right here. Well, at one point, they're standing up over by the dump and they start making out. And I'm like, what's going on here, dude? Like, we're in public, first of all. Like, I'm assuming the kid's at least 18, but I'm like, there is very clearly a large age difference here. Now, again,
Yeah.
you're married to somebody who's much older than you are. I'm not
Yeah.
discriminating against the age gap. What I'm saying is it's just everywhere now, and it's like this new plague that's just come over the country, the world,
Yeah.
whatever. And again, I don't know where it came from. It's scary.
Well, I mean, I feel as if America is modern day Babylon from the Bible.
Oh, I've thought
Um,
that too. Yeah.
what it just, again, instant gratification, do what you want. It doesn't
Yeah.
affect anybody. I was appalled when I started researching for the book and read like different books that are out there, Christian books. Swipe right. Like, I had no idea that was even available on your phone to like meet people and hook up like in an alley. Like, are you kidding me? And then finding out the things that are going on, not just in high schools, but in middle schools. Like, I'm sorry, but some of those things are disgusting. I would have never thought about just giving a random person a blowjob, let alone a middle schooler in a school bus or a dirty bathroom. And that's what's happening in America with our sixth graders. Like,
Yep.
it has crept all the way down to there. And, I don't necessarily know what the solution is, but people have to start making some noise. We have to start talking about it. We can't keep pretending like it's going to get better. And so,
But what's wild is the people that are making noise. There's mainstream movies coming out about this stuff. Like,
absolutely.
it's not doing anything. It just seems like it's progressively getting worse.
It seems like it's not doing anything, but I do think there's an undercurrent of people that are becoming more and more aware and are starting to rise up. I mean, about, just the evils of it. And which my husband, he says again and again and again, he's like, that chick's in jail. She's been sentenced. The list has been there forever. How come we never hear about that? Like,
Yeah.
oh, boy's supposedly dead. Maybe, maybe not. And you have all these victims. You have that documentary on Netflix. You have all of these things. And yet you don't hear about anybody getting any charges, getting anything. And that just seems to glorify it for other people, where then you have people like my husband that's like, I'd string someone up right in front of the courthouse and make
Oh
them a
yeah.
eunuch,
Yeah.
which, means castrate. And then, you start making an example of some people, and maybe some
100%.
people will back off. And,
Well, and I'll tell you from a prison standpoint, that's what used to happen. From a prison
oh yeah,
standpoint, it was you come through
my
the
husband
doors.
told me.
Yeah, you come through the doors and it's where's your papers at, and you either show papers or you're marked at that point. You don't show your papers
Yeah.
and you don't have like a charge that's reputable, meaning not reputable, but that doesn't involve kids or women or things like
Yeah.
that or hurting somebody. And I
Yeah.
saw some guys get put down pretty hard in there for having charges like that. But the problem now
Yeah.
is where that used to have the guards back in the day used to announce when the sex offenders would come in on the bus. You knew it was always on a Wednesday, and you knew the offenders were
Okay.
coming in, and they would march them through the gate and let everybody know, hey, we got one. And then it was off to the races. Not that I'm condoning that type of behavior, but that's prison rules, and you start setting those kinds of examples, and things like this stop. Right now, you have people just getting slaps on the wrist. You get a little bit of probation, and you're out the door. And then you have this kid with trauma that has to live the rest of their life with this on their tail end. It's it's scary, but now they've stopped doing that. Now they have their own cell blocks. Now they're protected. Now they're in protective custody.
Their rights.
Yeah, their rights.
A big part of my book pushes what I call the deadening of our senses. And so, if you want your kids to manifest and show the fruit of the Spirit, you have to water that. You have to show them that. I believe that if faith comes by hearing, and hearing the word of God, then love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, gentleness, like those things come when you get to see it. And so when I got clean and sober, we monitored everything that came in, and we watched all kinds of true stories and, overcoming stories, all of the great feel good movies as a family. So that way we could cultivate that within our boys. And they're extremely compassionate, great husbands, great fathers, like extremely compassionate, because we nurtured that, because you will have what you behold. Like every big preacher says it, where you stare, you will steer. Fix your focus. Like all the things, what you put in is going to come out. It has to. That's how it works. We're broken vessels. We leak. So if we're not putting in good, if we're not continuing to remain teachable, if we're not learning to do better, to be better, then we're just perpetuating the cycle. And so if I just sit down and veg out, like even, I can't tell you, it's constantly out there. My husband and I refuse to watch things with affairs. We don't watch things with people having sex. We don't watch things with people having sex, but it alludes to it or whatever.
Yeah.
But we try to really, because in our first marriage, we did watch porn together. In our first marriage, we did, so we have that pre-Christ marriage, and we have our new marriage where we are continually trying to, Philippians 4:8, dwell on things that are pure, holy, and lovely, and of good rapport, and that are edifying and building up and encouraging. And I mean, we love a good fight movie. We just watched Beekeeper. He loved it, and then watched it again with one of his kids. You know what I mean? So it's not like we don't ever watch anything of the world. Each person has to decide for themselves what is good. But for me, walking out of homosexuality, walking out of the lifestyle that I walked out of, I cannot. And like William Neeson has this movie, Los Miseros. It's a prison. I don't know. Have you ever seen it? It's an old movie.
Oh
He goes
yeah,
to
I've read the book.
prison, comes
Yeah,
out, has the factory. Okay, so
yeah,
we were gonna watch it one night. I type it in on Netflix, and as I'm typing in LES, because that's how you spell lost, lesbian pops up, and all I see is like 20 pictures of just hot girls together, swimsuits. Like you don't see any nudity, but there's no teenage boy that's not going to click on that.
yeah.
If you don't have parentals set up on your Netflix, your Hulu, your everything, I just had a 10-year-old tell me they've watched Orange is the New Black. What parent lets their kid watch chicks in prison having sex?
Yeah.
Like we've got to do better as a society. And if somebody won't tell them, then, you can't obey what you don't know. And so that's what I feel like my charge is, to make aware, to get awareness out there, not to shame people. Because JJ, my middle kid, the one where I'm at right now, he was 8 and 9, and I was letting him rap Eminem lyrics. I was like,
Yeah.
who's going to be next Justin Timberlake? And I let him say all the profanity, and I let him watch all the horror films. I didn't parent him well. And I talk about it in the book constantly. Different places where I made mistakes, but then places where I was able to dig up those bad seeds that I planted and throw some new seeds and create new memories and create, new intentions in order to change their trajectory so they're not on that same broken one that I was on and that I was leading them on. And so I'm not touting my horn like, oh, I've been doing this so great, because we all miss the mark. We're all going to mess up.
Hey,
I
I
like to
don't know if
quote,
you can
it
hear
talks
me. Hold
about,
on one
train up
second.
your
It's saying I
children in the
lost
morning when they
connection.
wake up, at night when they lay down, as you walk along the path, when you sit down to eat. So 4 times a day, we're supposed to be giving our kids good and bad examples. And I don't believe it means open your Bible and read a scripture and just let that ruminate. I believe that that means talk about the good and the evils of this world. Are we still with it?
I'm so sorry.
It's
It
okay.
popped up on top and said you're losing connection, or restore your connection. No, keep going. It's still recording.
Okay. So that's what I was saying. So I don't necessarily think it's like, every day quoting scripture to your kids. I think it's living it out and talking about compassion and empathy and kindness. And we don't know what everyone's life is like. My granddaughter, so we were raising our grandkids for the past 3 years. She was telling me about a horrible teacher. And I was like, well, hopefully she wasn't always that way, but sometimes bad things happen to people. They shape their mind. And then, these things start to happen. So first we prayed for that teacher, and then rented that movie out in California, Freedom Riders. And
Okay.
for my granddaughter and I sat and watched Freedom Riders together. True story. All these kids out in California, the struggles they have, high school kids just trying to do better, but no. And so again, there was an opportunity for me to take what the enemy meant for harm. This teacher's just a bee. She's just horrible. She sucks. She hates all kids. Why is she even there? Okay, how about we pray for her? And then let's look at what some teachers really have to go through. Could you imagine how hard it is? Kids coming in with their cell phones, recording teachers, your every move being put on display, parents not backing you up. And granted, there are bad eggs in every tree, or bad apples in every tree. Every job, every school, every family, everything. You're going to have some people that, guess what? You should just avoid them, if you can. But for the most part, people want to be good. They just maybe don't know how. And so it's our job to help teach. It's our job to help
It's
lead.
it's absolutely our job. I think there's a lot of, you brought up a good point. It's definitely very hard these days to raise kids, but it's extremely hard to be a kid these days. Like you said,
Yeah.
with the social media, with the phones, with the content that gets put out, these huge big tech has basically learned that they can narrow somebody's attention span down to about 30 seconds. And that's why you have all these shorts. So there's no
Yep.
attention span. It's instantly giving you that dopamine rush, and it's teaching you, it's feeding, like you said, it's watering those bad seeds.
Yeah.
Because you don't know. And what's wild is these algorithms, you don't know what the next thing that's going to pop up is. You could be
Yeah.
watching a motivational video 1 minute, and the next minute you've got some chick that's half naked doing a dance. Um,
Absolutely.
but you could not pay me. You couldn't pay me all the money in the world to go back to being a kid these days. I wouldn't want it. I would be terrified to be a kid these days. And obviously
Yeah.
kids are resilient, they adapt. But I think the best thing that parents can do, I mean, when you're raising a kid, and it's kind of how my wife and I raise our kids, is it's love unconditionally. I don't care if you come home and you're saying you're attracted to girls. I don't care if you were to come home and say I want to be a boy. I'm still going to love you. I'm not going to flip out and be like, get out of my house. It's
Yep.
acceptance, and it's working through and guiding them and showing them that this probably isn't the best route.
Yep.
Teaching them the consequences that are going to come out of everything. But it's so scary for our kids these days, man.
And how we respond is key. Like
Exactly.
in my book, I talk about this Life Site News. So it's a Christian podcast that comes out of Canada. And so I got good pictures, bad pictures from them, a way for you to talk to your children about pornography. What is a good picture? What is a bad picture? Oh, I don't want to see that. Come and tell your parents. And then parents, you can't freak out. If you
No,
freak the F
no.
out, then guess what? They're going to be scared to talk to you again.
Yep.
And so just little tools, and that's what I'm talking about. Like, we have to be teachable. We have to be able to shift with the changing times in order to be there to comfort and love unconditionally our children, and understand that sin is sin is sin. And everyone is going to struggle with stuff. That's not God's best. Now, with this whole transgender issue, my thing is, you're not old enough to make a decision. Like, you can't make a lifestyle permanent decision. And like, if you can't vote, if you can't smoke, you can't gamble, you can't drink till between 18 and 21, you should not be able to self-mutilate until at least 18 to 21. And that's
Well,
where I draw the line.
and that's a whole nother issue. This gender reassignment and all this shit that
It's a
excuse my
money.
language,
It's a big
all this
pharma
stuff that
money.
doctors are doing, and that's another big item of contention with me, where I'm like, how did we get here? And we could talk about. I could go on for days about how just awful and terrible this is, but
I felt like a tomboy growing up. I was raised by my dad. He constantly had me in short hair. He owned a lumber yard. I had a dirt bike. I went fishing, and the girls were mean to me. They were so mean to me because I was being raised by a man in a small town. My parents adopted my older brother, who was African American. He was the only one for like 60 miles. So, like, I had all of these things growing up that were against me in this little bitty all white town of 2,000 people, and just mean girls. So I totally understand that. I hated being a girl. I knew my dad wanted a boy. I would have totally fell into the lie. But now the thing is, like, love wearing dresses. I love my hair. I love being a girl. And the things I love most about my life are being a wife, a mom, and a grandma. All things that could have been stolen from me if I was part of this generation. And that's what we're doing. We're allowing our children's legacy to be stolen from them when it's in an uncomfortable, puberty's uncomfortable no matter what.
yeah,
No matter
yeah.
what. Nobody likes that crap. And then you got mean girls and mean boys and bullies and whatever. As parents, look, that's not God's best. That's not God's intent. And we just got to love them through it, and fight for them. Fight for them. Even if I don't know, because I'm not in that position. I'm super blessed. But I mean, like, I've got 13 grandchildren and two more on the way. Our baby, him and his wife are having twins. And so, like, I don't know what we're going to face in the years to come. I have no idea. But I know that I'm going to pray for them, and I'm going to love them, like you said, unconditionally. I'm not going to freak out in front of anyone. I'm going to be there for them. I'm going to be able to talk to them. And, this past year with my grandchildren, we just have said, that's not God's best. God desires X, Y, Z. And we just talk about, those things, those kind things, those good things. And it's sad that people are mean. And, we do our best to just pray for them and love them from a distance. But I mean, I don't envy the job my kids have in front of them
No.
at all.
I think at the baseline, it all boils down to the same. It just all boils down to communication. Communication is why you are now where you are at in your relationship with your husband, with God, in life.
Yep.
It's being able to communicate with your kids. It's being able to have the hard conversations with people, and I think that could potentially be where the ball is dropped. It's too much of the I feel, and there's not enough logic behind any decisions that are being currently made as far as like any of this, like, gender reassignment surgeries go, or like whatever it is. No parent is, I feel like, and listen, I may take heat for this and I don't really care. It's just my opinion. I don't think a lot of parents want to put into the work, want to put in the work when their children come home and they say, I think I'm a boy. I got to be honest. Like, I have friends that are trans. One has transitioned and is trying to transition back because she saw how terrible it went.
Yeah.
And I got to be honest, it's a broken home situation. And I think parents get too tied up in their own lives. This is where drug addiction starts. This is where kids start watching porn, kids start acting out. It's the communication stops. And
Yep.
if you stop communicating with your kids, I love the fact, I mean, even in the last 8 years, my daughter and my son call my wife more than they call me because I've still got the dad element to me. And that's their stepmother. But we have the hard conversations and there's not any passing judgment. There's not any, we might make jokes. Like we might like, you know what I mean? It's being parents, but we have the hard conversations with them. We're not afraid to sit back and say, well, why do you feel like that? Why is this? Why are you processing this like this? Why is this going through your head like this? And we give them solutions and we put in the work. Like you don't have kids just to have two little munchkins running around your house until they grow into full adults and you push them into society. Like that's the most important and hardest job that any adult will ever go through in their life, is to have kids and to raise them to be decent human beings. So you have to do the work. It's not just throw a tablet in their face. It's not set them in front of a TV. It's
the babysitter. And it's not just the babysitter for the kids. It's that the parents are self-soothing.
Yeah,
with
the parents
with
are
the
doing
phones
it too.
themselves. I can't tell you how many moms I've mentored and worked with. You know, kids starve for attention and they will look up to make sure you're looking at them. My husband and I have foster parented since all the kids have left the nest. We had 2 little boys for over a year. And I can't tell you how many times they would be looking to make sure I was paying attention to them, because that matters. And then you have these children that are basically being brought up hollow. Because we're not investing and pouring in. And I wish I could say I did it great when I got sober. I know I did a lot of good things, but I didn't have like my kids have talked to me since then, you know, like, Mom, you didn't really talk about purity. You don't really talk about sex. Like, it was just save sex for when you're married and don't talk about it. Well, I had such a dark sexual life that I didn't even know how to properly talk to my teenage boys when I had only been clean 4 or 5 years. And here's the thing, 20 years ago, nobody was talking about walking out of homosexuality.
Well,
go ahead.
I don't think it's about having the hard I don't think you necessarily have to bring, and I could be wrong on this too. You know, again, this is my experience, my opinions. I don't think you necessarily have to have all the hard conversations. I don't need to sit my kids down and talk about boys are born boys, girls are born girls, so on and so forth. You know what I mean? That there's plenty of conversations like that, hard conversations, that if you keep communication open with your kids and you raise your kids, not your cell phone raising kids, not tablets raising your kids, you communicate with your kids, you're honest, you're open. My kids know everything about me. They know my horror stories, they know my triumphs, they know everything. We are honest. They know my wife's. They know there's an open door of communication there. And as long as that door stays open, your kids will come to you and say, hey, I'm feeling this way. Hey, I'm thinking this. Hey, I think trying mushrooms is a great idea. No, then you have the hard conversation. But when you act out of anger, when you act out of emotion, when that door closes, then you've lost the battle at that point. And it takes a lot more to get that door back open than it does to close that door. That door can be closed in one conversation if you act out of pocket or act the wrong way.
Absolutely.
So I do want to encourage everybody, you know, if you have to you have to communicate with your kids. You don't just have kids to let a phone or let big tech raise your kids. That's
absolutely.
That's why we are in the state we are in.
It's that conversation my husband had with me from day one. The world's going to kick the crap out of your kids.
Yeah.
You know, and it's our job as parents to call out the good, to speak the truth, to encourage, to lead, to train up, and to have those hard conversations when necessary. I'm so grateful my kids are all grown and out of the nest, and they still have different challenges that they each face. But I do know that getting sober, my oldest was 10, and like I said, Freddie was 5. And so it has been a complete turnaround. My oldest, he's pre-med. You know, my middle one here, he's like a lead man. I mean, oh my gosh, just amazing. He's got this mind that just wants to fix stuff on the factory floor. And he's just been, and he's a felon, and, you know, he's in a salary position at, 26 years old.
That's awesome.
Yeah, amazing. I just love watching what God does. I just love, because here's the thing, God wants to bless the work of your hands. He does, but you have to put your hands to something. You can't sit on your couch and wish for it. Like, you've got to try stuff. You've got to do stuff. And I remember my husband telling him when he was 18, why don't you take over my lawn care business? Like, you'd be so good. And Josh was like, man, I'm okay working for the man. Like, I'm okay, like, moving up the ladder and letting doors open for me. And in the midst of COVID, when he could have got that fat unemployment check, he was working in the restaurant industry. His bio dad was like, hey, why don't you come out here to Kansas? I'll get you a job at the factory. Started out like $10, $12, $14 an hour. And before you know it, kids making $25, $26, $28 an hour. They're
Yeah.
paying to relocate him. Like and that is truly because he's watched his dad, my husband, his stepdad, but he calls him dad, walk out of prison and go hang the door flyers to get a lawn job. Do the hard work. What does it mean to do your job and do it with excellence? What does
Yeah.
it mean? Because then you get the referrals and then, and like that, we've just watched God do, you can't put him in a box. The word of God says, as you've believed, you will receive. And so if you want to believe that you got a no count life, you got, whatever, I mean, you can have it, but why would you want that?
Right.
Like when other people literally we just went to Italy last year. My convicted felony, like our baby was in the Air Force. We got to stay at his house, but my husband took me to Italy for 2 weeks for our 25-year wedding anniversary. And I mean, like, that's not normal. That's not what the average family, let alone felon, gets to experience. And I
It's
want people.
Yeah, it's not normal, but that's because the system doesn't want it to be normal.
Yeah,
And that's the whole point of, obviously that's the whole point of the podcast. I mean,
yeah,
people need to understand, like, you put in the work. Like I had a corporate America job. I did the same thing your son did. I just didn't want to do it anymore. I
absolutely.
was a operations manager for like 7 years, and I hated management, but I worked
Yeah,
my way. I was honest about my felonies. I showed people my character when I went into work every day, and I showed people my intent. And you just put the work in. And too many people get hung up on the idea of, well, I have a felony, and they get too many no's and doors slammed in their face that they get discouraged and they get
yeah,
hung up on it. And you have to understand, man, that's society at this point. You just have to continue to put one foot
yeah.
in front of another, and you work hard and you'll get there.
Absolutely. Italy is 16 years into our story. But
Yeah,
when, he first got out of prison and was living in a Salvation Army, a dude would come every morning who was cutting down trees and was like, hey, I need day laborers. And he
yeah,
hired my husband. We still have that relationship with that guy's mom almost
yeah,
20 years later. I was dragging tree limbs on a lady's yard and she's like, you're a pretty good worker. Do you clean houses? I end up cleaning doctors' houses 6 months off the needle. Then people didn't know me. They saw
right,
that I had honk if you love Jesus on the back of your car and they knew I was a hard worker.
yeah.
And like, I mean, legit, like
Well,
that's how I got my start.
and I do want to preface to everybody too, because I just had this like epiphany shoot up in my head. Everybody needs to understand, like, I've talked many times about working hard and working your way up. Everybody needs to understand, just like you said, I started somewhere at the bottom too. I started serving at
Yeah.
Olive Garden when I came home. Then I worked in a cold storage facility, a negative 10-degree freezer for like 8 months to a year until they noticed my hard work. It wasn't just I came home and I had prior experience somewhere and I got put in these
Yeah.
positions. Like there was a lot of struggle, there was a lot of hard work, and there was years of it. There was 2 to 3 years of me just doing like staying even keeled, doing what I needed to do, so like making my probation officer happy, staying clean. But I did the work and I took the bullshit jobs and I took the hard. I did.
Yep.
We would have rail cars full of potatoes come in the back and it'd be negative 10 degrees. And everybody was like, we hate the freezer, we don't want to do it. And I was always, hey, I'm headed back there if you guys want to come help. If not, I'll handle it. You
Yep.
take the hard jobs, you make a name for yourself.
Absolutely. I 100% agree. And that's been one of my favorite things to share. Like when I go and I work with girls in recovery houses, like you didn't get where you're at overnight. You're not going to be better overnight,
No.
but you can gradually work towards becoming that person that you want to be. And like I said in the beginning, God is a God of restoration. He does desire to put our broken pieces back together. We just have to surrender them to him and to be willing to be teachable, and then get around people that you want what they have. Like
Yeah.
I have so many spiritual moms that have helped me. Like, and it's funny because I didn't talk about the homosexual thing at all in Kankakee. First 8-9 years of sobriety. And then in New Orleans, I only spoke about it to about 3 people. It was super embarrassing. And just like, because a lot of Christians are so judgy and I was so afraid of it. And then when they started legalizing gay marriage, and I had friends that were just like really struggling with different things, and I just knew that God was calling me to share my whole testimony. And, here I've got 18 years remarried, faithfully to my husband. Has it been easy? Do we always see eye to eye? Have we, of course not. There has been arguments. But most people would look at my marriage and say, well, you've got a really good marriage. And I do. I'm so blessed. I'm
Well,
so blessed by
I'll
my
tell
marriage.
you, there's a lot of I could see where you and your husband would be a force to reckon with, because anybody that could. And my first wife and I had a very similar story to your husband and your story, but obviously she's my ex-wife. But there's a lot to be said about a couple that got married, stayed married for 25 years, went through that type of hardship, and made it work, and then have an awesome life. Not because one of you got sober, but because both of you got sober and both of you leaned into God and both of you built
Absolutely.
something loving and truly amazing on the back end. And I got to be honest, that's beautiful. And I'm a crier. I'm starting to tear up a little bit, but it's beautiful. Like, that's the relationship that I want with not that I want the front end of that relationship. Like, I've lived that front end of the relationship, but that's what my wife and I work towards. And that's the
Absolutely.
beautiful. Then people look up to our marriage. People tell us all the time, they're like, you guys look like you have such a great marriage. And we do. But there's a lot of hard work that goes into that. But I like sitting here listening to you and talk about your husband and your struggles, and it's beautiful. And I love hearing stories, not only that you were able to pull yourself out of the gutter, but your husband pulled himself out of the gutter, and then you guys built something awesome out of it.
So I want to tell you every time we share a testimony, we do joint testimonies. We've traveled, we've been blessed to go all around the United States. God put us on the 700 club. Like he really has blessed us. And Tony always closes with this. Men, you are the spiritual leaders of your home, whether you recognize it, want to be it, own it or not. Where your family is where you led them.
Yeah.
And he had to take a hard look sitting in prison. He had kids back with his ex-wife. He had a boys' school, girls' group homes, foster care. I'm strung out. The way everyone got thrown about and that total chaos and destruction for all of those years was because he led us there. And so he takes very seriously his job as the spiritual leader of the home. Just recently, I've been, kind of having the buzz wanting to get a new tattoo. And so I'm going to get arrows on my inner arm, and it's going to be Psalm 127, because it says that children are like arrows in the hand of a mighty warrior. Arrows are given to the warrior to launch into battle, not to sit safely in the quiver. And then, dear Lord,
Oh,
I
what was
want my
that?
children
Because
to.
I like that. What was that?
So
Psalm
Psalm
21,
127 or
127.
120, yes, it says
Okay.
that children are like arrows in the hand of a mighty warrior. Arrows are given to the warrior to launch into battle, not to sit safely in the quiver. And so there's a movie called Raising Arrows. We watched it with the foster kids, like I think 4 or 5 years ago. And then again, we were raising our 3 granddaughters. And so we're constantly trying to let them see this. And so in this movie, you've got a good couple, but they have one kid that basically goes off to college and becomes like an atheist. And mom and dad have to reevaluate how serious they're taking their walk. Does their Sunday 1 hour in church, is that reflected at all through the rest of the week? And how
Right.
can they make that? How can they live that out? And again, it's not about just sitting and watching sermons all day long. If that's your thing, awesome, do it. Feed your mind. But I mean, being a good person actually does take work, because when someone pulls out in front of me, I still want to honk. I still want to curse. I mean, my husband's
Oh,
pulled his car over.
I
My
still get
husband's
caught.
pulled
Yeah.
my husband's pulled the car over. The boys are like, do you remember that time dad was about to pull that dude out the car? And I mean, like that inner fleshly person who we are in our fallen nature is there. We just have to learn not to feed it. I've got that story in the book about the 2 wolves. What one are you feeding? Oh, because you can have lust, anger, bitterness, rage, just gross, yucky feelings, sad. Hurt people. Or you can get healed, and then you can truly live a life, filled with love and compassion and all the things that God created us to live within. um
No, I'll tell you, working on yourself daily. Obviously, being a truck driver, I see all kinds of And I used to be a big road rager. And over the last few years, being able to just work on myself day in and day out, it's been the biggest gap I've had. Even, and I'm not vocal about it. I wasn't vocal about it. I am now because obviously it's been the work that I've been putting in for the last couple of years. But at one point, a few months ago, my wife and my mom, within the same week, both had asked me. They were like, "What's going on with you? You're different. You're not, you're not like." And so it's nice to finally be able to like talk about it and just see kind of that other people are noticing as well. No, so this was. Is there anything else you want to talk about?
No, I think it's been fantastic. It was
It
great.
has been. So I'm going to throw your 50 Shades of Truth. Tell everybody where you can get the book at.
So it's on Amazon. And so you can just order it off Amazon. And over the past year, we took, like I said, kind of a break from speaking and traveling because we have the 3 granddaughters. And so, I'm on Facebook. If someone wants to message me, I have no problem sending out an autographed
Throw your
copy.
Facebook name out.
So it's Nikole, Nikole, Bittler, which is my maiden name, Bittler, Thompson,
Okay.
Thompson. And so, like, I'm on the things. I'm old, though, so I don't really know how to use all the things. I mean, I slowly figure it out. But my email is 50 Shades of Truth book at gmail.com. And it's just like the book cover, 50 Shades of Truth book, BOOK, at gmail.com. And so if someone wants a copy, anytime I sell one, we donate one to a local jail or prison. I just did a jail ministry this past Sunday, and I'm going to mail up 4 copies to the local jail to the different girls that we spoke with. Because again, anytime you can water hope in someone's life, like that can change their total trajectory. Like you don't realize how important your story is. We overcome by the blood of the lamb and the word of our testimony. There's a reason that's written in the book. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? That is so important, our testimony, because there's power in it. There's power in it that people don't just see every day, especially when you share the gross things that you're scared to share. Because as God is sanctifying you and helping you to live a better life, people that are stuck in it, they need to see that there is a way out. People do recover.
Well, there's a lot of freedom, and one of my favorite interviews to do. A guy, Sonny Von Cleveland. He was he was in the first season of podcast that I did. He's an author as well. Hey, white boy, lives out in California. But within the first 30 seconds, and this has sat with me since his interview. Within the first 30 seconds, he said, "I don't look at my felonies as a hindrance. I look at them as a bonus to my resume." And ever since he said that, I've kind of put an emphasis on the dark things that were in my life, because the dark things are the things that people don't want to talk about. And the more you talk about them, the more you never know who or what words you never know what words you're going to say that are going to influence who. So talking about like the weird stuff, or talking about, porn or child trafficking, or whatever the case may be,
Absolutely.
whatever your demons are that you suffer with, you never know who that's going to reach and who it's going to help. So no,
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
um
So hit me up if you want a copy of the book, or just order it on Amazon. And like you said, leave a review. I mean, we're fighting algorithms where,
yeah.
social propaganda and media does, wants to push the truth down and wants to just flood all these lies and live your truth and do what feels good. And I mean, the problem is, the reason I put a shock collar on my dog is because what feels good to her is the semi, running free. But
Yeah.
when she runs free, there's semis out there. And
Yeah.
so, a little bit of boundaries is what we all need. We all need them for a reason. And
Well, and
so,
it all boils down to discipline, and you need to learn. One of the biggest game changers you can do is learn discipline.
yeah.
How too much, what's the saying? A little bit of something, not in all cases, but a little bit of something's okay, but like too much of something, I don't know. I can't
Well,
think.
there's a scripture. I'll give you the scripture for that. All things are lawful, but not all things are beneficial. All things are
Okay,
lawful,
yeah.
but I will not be mastered by anything. And so, what are you shackled to? What are
Yeah.
you mastered by? What do you have to have in order to be able to function? Because that's an addiction. And
Yeah.
it's not just hard. I mean, it can be, people are workaholics, they're ignoring their family. People are shopaholics, they're not investing in the right places. We put all different kinds of things as idols that make. I was a churchaholic. Like, even run, like, you can become busy doing good things and forget about what's most important. This is what I want to leave you with. Women, you set the tone of your home. What happens inside your four walls, you set the tone for that. How you talk to your kids, how you greet your husband when he comes home from work, how you greet your kids when they get off the school bus, when they wake up in the morning, sets their whole tone for the day. And how you lay them down at night is how they're going to sleep. And
Yeah.
so it may not be fair. You don't get a day off. I mean, you can take a break. You need a timeout, go to the room, shut the door. Don't show all that craziness if you can avoid it. But as women, we set the tone. And so, it's an honor and it's a privilege. Like, you're training up arrows to be sent out there.
Yeah.
To make a
I love
difference.
that. I love that psalm. I'm going to remember that one. So,
Good.
all right, Nikole. Hey, I thoroughly enjoyed this podcast. I thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah,
I think
absolutely.
you, like I just said, man, I am getting goosebumps again talking about it. I think you and your husband have a amazing story. I am beyond thankful for the fact that you and I crossed paths. Like I said, I don't get a whole lot of good guests from that podcast guest thing, but you've been an amazing guest. I think you have an awesome story. I'm more than happy to promote your book. So thank you.
And hopefully you'll have an interview with he's got a surgery scheduled in the next
Hey,
couple of
when he's
months.
recovering, let's do it. While he's recovering, we can do it.
Absolutely.
But yeah, again, thank you so much for coming on. I follow you. We're friends now on Facebook, so I look forward to seeing everything that you guys are doing. We'll stay in touch. And again, guys, it is 50 Shades of Truth. Check it out on eBay, Amazon. Check her out on email, 50 Shades of Book, 50 Shades of Truth Book at gmail.com.
Yep.
Again, Nikole Thompson, thank you so much.
Thanks.
We'll talk to you soon. That was cool.
All right.